You know, this was inevitable, but at the same time, does it feel early to do something like this? I mean, granted, Pokemon Legends ZA only came out like a couple of months ago at this point. But at the same time, we've talked about it so much and for so long now that even after playing it, it feels like we've had it almost forever. Now, if you played it casually, didn't think too much about it, you liked Pokemon, you wanted to play some Pokemon, and you got Pokemon, you probably played Pokemon Legends EA and didn't think too much of it. But then you go online and then you realize that this is the most controversial Pokemon release we have ever seen. And then you sit there and wonder, like, how is this possible? The last Pokemon game that we received was the most controversial. How in the world did this game manage to top that? Well, I guess when you're under Pokemon Company, that's allegedly really easy to do for some reason. Hi, what's going on? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. As I'm sure a lot of you have already ascertained from the title and thumbnail, we are having a very long-awaited discussion. Well, I say long-awaited, but in reality it's only been like 2 months and some change since Legends ZA even released. Regardless though, I wanted to make sure to do this one before Pokemon Day because I have a gut feeling this is probably going to be like one of the biggest anniversaries we're going to witness together for a good while, and that's going to overshadow a lot of the content plans I have going forward into this next year. So, regardless as to how obvious it is, welcome to our official Pokemon Legends ZA versus Pokemon Scarlet and Violet video. As per usual with these versus videos, I have a list of categories that we're going to go down and talk about one by one, and we're going to see which game is superior in each category. And naturally, our final winner, if you want to call it that, will be determined by, yeah boy, our point system. I'll be giving a point to whichever game I think deserves it in each individual category. Simple enough, right? I recommend a big hearty meal for this one. Go ahead, grab your hamburger helper, mix that up, stir fry it with some fish paste and octopus and stuff like that, and you know, maybe a room temperature drink is totally fine, right? What do you need ice for? Why don't you go ahead and maybe toss that out the window or something, maybe beat it into a curb or something, because what do we need ice for? And why don't we go ahead and do our little comparison of Pokemon Legends ZA versus Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. For our first category, we have graphics. Well, what does that entail? What was the easier game to look at? What generally had the better design? Well, under normal circumstances, it's really funny because usually people would argue what game looked better. But in this case, most people would probably argue which game doesn't look worse. In my personal opinion, I'm gonna keep it real. Yeah. It's going to Legends ZA. Even going back through Pokemon Scarlet and Violet this recent year, I still had the same exact issue I had with my original playthrough, which was that all of the environments and stuff like that, for the most part, still looked really off. Like, they didn't mesh together very well like they should have, and overall, there was just a lot of overworld that was looking really, really awkward. Those games are at their best graphics-wise when we're inside of a building, but that's really unfortunate because 9 times out of 10, we're not spending any of our time in a building. We are playing our first open-world Pokemon game, meaning that they needed to go out of their way to make sure that the overworld looked really good, and a lot of the time, it just didn't. Caves, beaches, sands, dunes, everything looks so awkward. And if there was anything just a bit too far away, forget about it. It looked like clay. It just did not mesh well. Even after the update, it just wasn't strong graphically. The character models in the Pokemon looked fine, of course, but everything else, very hit or miss. This point goes over to Legends ZA for me because while still not the strongest game graphically, despite the flat walls, the game overall looked pretty damn good, and it was a lot more consistent with its graphical stylings. And while not as drastic of a leap as people probably would have liked, the character models as well of the Pokemon have been improved, even if it is, like, you know, kind of slight. The long and short of it is, Pokemon Legends ZA is simply an easier game to look at than Scarlet and Violet. Well, it's easier on my peepers, per se. I can't speak for everybody, maybe you disagree with that, but that's where I stand right now. Speaking of things that's easier to look at, the next category that we have listed here is the function. Which game played smoother? Which game had a lot less interruptions? What game did I experience less crashes with, less general technical issues with overall during the course of my playthroughs? Believe it or not, this is also an easy one that goes over to Legend ZA. Now don't get me wrong, when I was writing this category, I did consider the fact that we did get that major update on Switch 2 that made it so that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet ran at a consistent 60 frames with almost no frame drops or major issues throughout the playthrough, which is great, that's awesome, that's fine and dandy. However, there's still a major problem to address here. That version of the game can only be played on the Nintendo Switch 2, meaning that if you're still rocking out with the Switch 1, you're still stuck with the janky mess of a state that game was released in to begin with. The pop-in still sucks and there's a lot more obvious. Frame rate slows to a slideshow the moment you touch a body of water. Pray to God that you have autosave turned on, because if you don't, you will lose a lot of progress from the inevitable crash that will happen, damn near guaranteed. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it is actually a miracle that they managed to get that game past any form of testing and out to the general public before it was released in a working state. It is insane how they released that game. And the update doesn't matter that much, because by the time you get a Switch 2, you're not really thinking about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, you're playing everything else that the Switch 2 has to offer. Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, you're playing the better versions of all the games that they re-released on the console. You're not going back to some whack-ass update for Scarlet and Violet. It's barely worth it for most people, and I can't blame anybody for that. I'm a very patient person, which is why I was able to see a lot of the diamonds in the rough when it came to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. However, that does not excuse the fact that that game was in an unacceptable state and should not have been released to the public. Because of that, it left a lot of bad tastes in people's mouths when it came to Pokemon. On the other side of things, whether you're playing Legend ZA on Switch 1 or Switch 2, most people will tell you it functions fine. At the very least, Pokemon Legend ZA was finished in a completed state on both consoles, and that's more than anybody could ask for, apparently. Neither of these games are pushing any form of technical limits when it comes to these consoles, but at the very least, Pokemon Legend ZA does take it a bit further. Not by much, of course, but it still did that and still managed to prove that it could function just fine on both consoles consistently, and you know what, that's great. That's totally fine. Really shows what extra time can do when it comes to the quality of the games, doesn't it? But I guess that's neither here nor there. Let's move on. The next category we have here is listed as gimmick, but you could also kind of think of this as the gameplay segment. I just felt that since Pokemon, for the most part, is generally the same across the board, it'd be pretty redundant to have a gameplay section here as well. So let's just lean towards the gimmick. For example, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's gimmick could be the fact that it was an open world title, our first real open world title, something that we had never received before. But when it comes to Pokemon, usually when you hear the term gimmick, the thing that comes to mind is like how they changed up the gameplay. What made it so that the gameplay loop was more interesting, more unique, more fascinating? What had you coming back more between these games? On the surface, it might seem a little unfair, but I'm still gonna give this point to Legend ZA, and I'll tell you why. In reality, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is still very much bog standard Pokemon. And while that's not a bad thing in of itself, it's still something that we're all too familiar with. You get your starter Pokemon, you explore the new region, get a brand new team to raise up, battle the gym leaders, beat the story or whatever, and you get your championship. Pretty standard stuff for the most part. Even with the added feature of terrestrialization, while still neat, it's just a way to change up the battles a little bit, which is totally fine. I love terrestrialization. It's definitely the most technical of all the gimmicks that we've received so far, but overall, it's still just the simple way to change up your strategy. It's still turn-based Pokemon like we good and well know. The reason that I give this point over to Legend ZA is because they actually took it a step further with ZA and did something that I said aloud that I never thought that they would do, which was giving us real-time combat. I'm not really one to delve too far into leaks because I personally like to be surprised for the games that are coming, so if anybody and everybody already knew about the real-time combat aspect, I was not one of those people. which is why I was genuinely surprised to see that change. This battle system made it so that every encounter that we had, whether it be with wild Pokemon or against other trainers, was quick and to the point, and I absolutely loved that. And when you really sit down and look back at Pokemon Legends Arceus, you could tell that the boss battle aspects there were severely limited based on the fact that that game still needed to be turn-based. So when it comes to Legends EA, when you really put them side by side, you could see those ideas fully realized. Instead of throwing bombs and waiting for your opportunity to get back into a turn-based battle, you are having actual genuine boss battles, dodging moves in real time, hitting them back to back in real time. It's a stark difference. And also, on top of that, a lot of people will tell you that Mega Evolution as a gimmick is probably the best thing that Pokemon has ever introduced to the franchise. And while I absolutely do love it as a gimmick, it is a cheap power-up when it comes to the original games that it was introduced in. The way it's utilized in this context actually makes a lot more sense, and I love it here way more than I love it in turn-based combat. Building up a meter so that you have a limited amount of time to utilize Mega Evolution just simply makes a lot more sense to me, instead of just utilizing it at the beginning of any battle willy-nilly without thinking about it too much, because you can just utilize it pretty much any time you want with no timer on it. You have to use it much more scarcely. And in the case of rogue mega battles, where Mega Evolution, or at the very least plus moves, are extremely important to do actual damage, you're going to be fighting for your life trying to get that Mega Bar raised up as quick as humanly possible. I really like that. I feel like I don't hear a lot of people talk about this, but the way it's utilized here adds a lot more value to the mechanic. Even in online battles, you're not just throwing out Mega Evolution willy-nilly. You still need to work for it, and you still need to make sure that one of the 3 Pokemon that you're battling with is a good matchup for the other 3 opponents on the field. One could definitely argue that Mega Evolution in this case is even more cheap because of how it's utilized, but me personally, I think it works best in this atmosphere. And that's not even mentioning the fact that I absolutely adore the ZA Royale as our means of progression. I've said this in a couple of videos throughout the last 2 years or something like that, but I did say that I've been wanting a point-based progression system that makes it so that the trainers are a lot more important for a good minute now. And that is precisely what happened here. Instead of route to route, trainer to trainer, city to city, gym to gym, it is one city. Every night they have the battle royale, and you gain points in every battle that you participate in until you're ready for the next major progressive challenge battle. And that is literally all I could have asked for with a system like this. If something like this could work in future titles, we'll definitely have to talk about at some point, probably this month, but not now. That's way too much to delve into. Moving to the next category, we have world and environment. Essentially, between the 2 games, which world had me more immersed? Which had me wanting to explore every nook and cranny, left and right, every possible inch of the world that the game offered to me? How were the people? How were the Pokemon? How did everything work in tandem to bring this game to life? Now, believe it or not, this actually was not an easy decision, but yeah. I'm gonna have to go ahead and give this one the Scarlet and Violet, actually. Here's the thing, right? I think that for the most part, Legends EA did a good job of giving us a very specific environment in which the city felt a lot more alive. A lot of people were walking around doing their own thing, side quests were extremely active, you know what I'm saying? And the general world was very nice, you know, Pokemon were sleeping in parks, doing their own thing, swimming, eating, you know, it was just nice, you know, it was a very nice environment. But the thing about that, the biggest problem we have here, is that Scarlet and Violet actually gave us all of Paldea to explore. So this is kind of barely fair, right? I don't think it was necessarily a bad idea to have us confined to just one city, especially when said city is one of the biggest cities in the entire world of Pokemon. I think the gist of the problem just simply lies in the fact that there was just not enough variety when it came to how we explored this city. All of the wild areas are essentially either makeshift parks or rooftops. That's it. And under normal circumstances, I would say it would be pretty unfair to compare that to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, considering the fact that we have an entire region to explore, if we didn't have Legends Arceus beforehand. Going from exploring these massive zones and unique biomes in both Legends Arceus as well as Scarlet and Violet, to being confined into one city with extremely limited spacing when it comes to the wild areas, is a very stark difference. We'll talk about this in a future video, but I think what we really needed was like a better blend of like the liveliness of the characters and the Pokemon within Legends ZA, but with the vastness and openness of what we had in Legends Arceus, or potentially even Scarlet and Violet. Maybe not open world. I think open zone is a better fitting situation for something like the Legends series. But overall, it just felt a lot more claustrophobic in a way, you know what I'm saying? The environments were simply too repetitive, and for a series that has never had a situation like this before, yeah, this wasn't the way to go. One thing's for sure though, this will probably never happen again, because like I said, this is the biggest city in the series so far, so we'll have to see what happens, because I know a lot of people were just not fond of that concept. Next, why don't we go ahead and move on to the characters. In the most simplest sense, which of these games had the stronger cast? This, I fear, is a very easy lob over to Legends ZA. Here's the thing, I do think that the development, generally speaking, for both Penny and Arven was very good throughout Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and probably better than most of the development that we've seen in Pokemon Legends ZA. However, outside of those two and Nemona, those are the only primary characters you really care all that much about throughout your playthrough. Just like most of the other generational titles, most of the characters that you run out to that aren't your rivals are pretty much one and done for the most part. One could definitely argue that you do have the option to go back to the school and get to know these characters a little bit more on a deeper personal level, but A, it's not that much, B, it doesn't take that long and you get through all their dialogue in like 15 minutes if you really wanted to, especially by the end of the game, and C, like I just said, it is completely optional. I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't attached to the Elite Four or any of the gym leaders in Scarlet and Violet at all, because we saw them one time and that was it. And even with the Elite Four, who did consistently pop up a couple of times here and there, they were cool, but they didn't really provide that much to the overall plot at all. Although, you know what? My bad. I have to give flowers to Director Clavel. Instead of him just sitting on his ass waiting for you to clean up a mess that was technically his fault, he was with us every step of the way. And in reality, in case we failed those battles, he probably could have stepped in and handled it himself, because by the end of the Starfall Street storyline, we see that he is very much a capable Pokemon trainer that is kind of strong. He could have dealt with it himself. However, it was a lot more meaningful for those beatings to come from a fellow classmate and show that, you know, there was somebody their age, you know, around their age that cared about them, that, you know, didn't want them to go down that path, or at least that's the general idea I'm sure that they were trying to spit with that. But regardless, you know, I do like Clavel a lot, so I'll give him his flowers too. While I will say that there are some really good developments throughout Scarlet and Violet with a lot of these characters, I think that just the general amount of connection that I have with the characters in Legends ZA is just stronger. I think what I like more than anything about Legends ZA is the fact that these characters don't just disappear off the face of the earth. Because we're all in this city taking place in the exact same Royale, we are seeing these characters all the time. We are seeing their personalities in so many different and unique situations. We're seeing how they interact with one another in fun, different ways. We're seeing all of their problems laid out. We're seeing little developments here and there with them, and it is just a nice situation. It is a growth. These people come to really like you, and you really come to like them too. There was a time where I thought Canary was a straight up Iono ripoff, but in reality, I'm much more attached to her than I ever was Iono. And I like Iono, but I spend a lot more time with Canary. And in situations like that, where you come to realize she's kind of funny, man. She's swearing up and down with no remorse about it. She's a hyper personality. She's cool. She's great. And I'm almost feeling bad that I just almost wrote her off as a complete ripoff, because that's not the case at all. It's situations with characters like that that make you realize, like, oh, no, I'm attached to this character. I know this character on a deeper level now, and I can't imagine not having this game without them. And so, yeah, no, this is a case for pretty much a lot of the characters in Legends ZA, especially when, you know, most of them come out at the very end to help you with a major issue that's happening with the city, and they're not just sitting on their asses letting you handle it by yourself, which is something a lot of previous Pokemon games cannot say. I know that there's a lot of situations in ZA though that are very hit or miss for people when it comes to like Urbane and Tawny, and the general connection between Team MZ not being as strong as it possibly could, especially with AZ just kind of you know, not being as present as he probably could. But for the most part, I think that they generally did a good job of getting this city to really collaborate and be together, be more tight-knit than a lot of previous Pokemon games. And I don't know, I think that just resonated with me a lot. Let's move on to the next major category, the story. Which story had the better plot, the better developments? Which one did a better job of wrapping up their story with a nice neat little bow at the end? This one actually wasn't easy, believe it or not. But I think I'm gonna give this one to Legend ZA as well. I'm not exaggerating when I say I really did enjoy both of these stories. On one hand, you have Scarlet and Violet, which divides itself into 3 separate storylines that all tie together into one final major plotline. And then you have Legend ZA, which taps into a story that we didn't think we would ever see again, let alone wrapped up in a major finale. I think one of the things that kind of hurts Scarlet and Violet in this case though, is that one of the storylines is barely a storyline at all. As much as I love Nemona as a character, there is nothing significant about her side with the gym challenge. It is literally just regular schmegular Pokemon on her side, with the occasional rival battles thrown in here and there, just like every other Pokemon game. The bulk of the story really comes from Arven, if we're completely honest. The mystery surrounding Area Zero and whatever the hell is happening with the professor and how that connects to Koraidon and Miraidon and things like that, that is where a good chunk of the story comes from. And I do think that that finale is so damn cool, and that music, oh my god, I think about it all the time. But here's the thing, I think that while the stakes were there, they weren't as strong as they were in Legend ZA to me. The situation in regards to Angie just consistently gathering power from all of the Mega Evolving happening throughout the city is a very, very interesting concept, and we can see that situation coming to fruition consistently throughout the game because we have to always deal with Mega Rogue Evolved Pokemon. On top of that, alongside that situation, a bunch of different Pokemon are being drawn into the city because of that Mega Evolution power, and people are getting fed up with it because their homes, their businesses, and things like that are getting ruined by all of the wild areas that they have to open up to compensate for all of the new Pokemon that are living there. As weird as it is to say, I think that Legend ZA does just a little bit better of a job balancing what's happening with the story and the gameplay. When it comes to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, nobody really knew what was going on outside of you and a very, very select few people. And the situation didn't truly come to fruition until the very end, when you realized that the entire time you were talking to an AI version of the professor that was begging you to kill it in battle so it didn't unleash all of the past and future Pokemon onto the present. Like I said, I absolutely adore the concept of what happened in Scarlet and Violet, but I just feel like the way that it was handled throughout a majority of the playthrough wasn't as balanced, for lack of a better term. Overall, again, this was not an easy decision. I was racking my brain for a good minute there. I had to walk back and forth a couple of times to really sit down and think, like, which one did I really enjoy more? And it was a pretty close call. Like, I was very close to picking Scarlet and Violet a good couple of times, but after 3 playthroughs of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and 2 back-to-back playthroughs of Legend ZA, I think I can confidently say that Legend ZA, by a hair, is a little bit better. I still think that Pokemon stories in general could use a lot more work in how they handle their characters and development and stakes. But at the very least, you can see that they are slowly but surely improving from the Sword and Shield days, and that is all I can ask for. The next category that I have listed here is the DLC. Which did a better job of adding on to the base game? Which one had more added on memorable content? Which was the better downloadable content? Unlike the last one, this is, weirdly enough, a really easy dunk for Scarlet and Violet. The thing about Pokemon Legends EA is that even if you do really like the game, it does get extremely repetitive when we have a situation in which we are constantly making these donuts to go to these same areas over and over and over again. And in reality, all this is just completely reutilized assets from the same game, just blackened and whitened now. While I did enjoy myself for the most part, once I got past the initial story and started getting into like the post-game stuff, I was like, okay, this is so incredibly repetitive. I'm taking a break. and I never came back to it. There's still legendaries and mythicals that I didn't catch. I didn't finish the Pokédex. I'm still missing Mimikyu and Zeraora and stuff like that. I didn't do all of the side quests. There's a lot of stuff that I just didn't do, and I don't know if I'm gonna do it, if I'm honest. I think the simplest way to put it is, if you really liked Legend ZA, it is just more Legend ZA at its base, like in the simplest way that I could put it. That's it. And like I said, the story's like nothing to write home about or anything like that. It was a simple Saturday morning little what if story in regards to Ansha and the donuts and Hoopa and Rayquaza and stuff like that, with Darkrai being like a little bit of a catalyst of everything that's happened up to that point, absorbing all of the mega energy from the main story and becoming this Black Doom wannabe. I don't know what was going on with that, but regardless, you know, it was cute, but kind of whatever in the grand scheme of things. Meanwhile, Scarlet and Violet added 2 brand new entire areas to explore with a complete story that's connected between the two. You go on something of a little emotional journey with Carmine and Kiaren. You get to know their relationship with Kitakami and, you know, how Kiaren feels about the ogre and things like that. You even transfer to their school at Blueberry Academy, and you see how impressively technologically advanced the place is, and you even get a glimpse into the true situation with Terrapagos and terrestrialization and stuff like that. It's a really neat little thing. Trying to avoid re-explaining it too thoroughly, because anybody that's been watching this channel for years has heard me talk about it over and over and literally over again. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's DLC just offers more and a lot more variety in said content, so yeah, that one was definitely a no-brainer. Now, let's wrap this up with one final point, which gave the overall better video game experience for me. And I mean, come on. You guys have been watching this video the entire time, right? It wasn't really that hard of a decision. But yeah, no, I think that Legend ZA for the most part improved on pretty much almost every front in comparison to Scarlet and Violet, and left me with a more preferred memorable experience. This is not me saying that I hate Scarlet and Violet, by the way. I've been very vocal about the fact that I do like Scarlet and Violet despite its many flaws. It's just that those flaws hurt it a bit too much when it first initially released for a lot of people, and I can't really blame them for that. But just thinking back and forth between my first experience with Pokemon Legend ZA and Scarlet and Violet, Legend ZA wins out by a landslide. As you've heard throughout this video, Legend ZA just initially gave me a lot more of what I wanted. A smooth gameplay experience, a brand new combat system, a point-based progression system that isn't just the simple gym challenge, and on top of all of that, it's a sequel. I've been saying for a good while now that I would have loved for Pokemon to continue reutilizing older previous generations of Pokemon in newer, fresher ways, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. The Legends titles has given Game Freak the opportunity to do that stuff, so now I don't think I would mind returning to Kanto or Johto as much if we are returning to a distant point in the past or a distant point in the future that could really significantly change what's going on. So don't get me wrong, while I do generally enjoy traditional Pokemon and the generational titles as they are, I really like the freedom and the concepts that they're able to utilize within the Legends titles, which is why I just simply resonate with Legends ZA more than Scarlet and Violet. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that agree with me in the case that Pokemon Legends ZA improves on a lot of the stuff that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet failed at. So how in the hell is it more controversial? I mean, the answer is pretty obvious, right? The price. While I do enjoy them, I've always been the first to admit that neither of these titles are worth AAA price. And now, games are getting more expensive to justify the price and time that it takes to make them. So, it's getting a little harder to justify something like $70 for a game that definitely is lacking in a lot of components in the modern era. $70 for a smoother experience? That's not okay. That's not okay. It's really not. And so a lot of people are rightfully concerned about the future of general gaming, but very specifically Pokemon, because Pokemon is a juggernaut for Nintendo. And, you know, if they're willing to milk Mario Kart for $80, You know, I don't think I'm crazy to believe that an $80 Generation 10 is on its way. I don't think that's insane. And you know, it doesn't really matter how good Generation 10 turns out to be. There's no justification for $80 on it. I don't know, maybe I'm petty, but like I said in one of my previous videos, I really don't think they've earned the right to charge people that much after going through so much turmoil in terms of quality with this series. But I don't know, maybe that could just be a me thing. Before we wrap things up here, somebody mentioned that in one of my previous Versus videos, one of the things that I probably should have compared was the Pokemon availability. And while that is a very good one, I don't think that's a fair comparison for these games in particular. For something like Sword and Shield versus Scarlet and Violet, that makes a lot more sense considering the fact that those are both generational titles. If I did something like that for Legends Arceus and Legends EA, that would make a lot more sense because those are not generational titles. Those are completely separate entities within the mainline series. With Scarlet and Violet, you have a massive amount of Pokemon available between the base game and the DLCs, as well as all of the new Pokemon that are introduced. Meanwhile, Legends EA does not have the option to introduce completely 100% brand new Pokemon like that because it is a sequel title, so that wouldn't really make that much sense. There are ways that it could be done, and Legends Arceus has proved that, but we'll talk about that another time. So for now, I'll just save that discussion for another time because as of right now, I don't think it would be fair to compare that with these games, but hey, you know what? Once again, maybe that's just me. Okay, so that just about wraps up for this one. This is a lengthy one, so I have some editing to do. So I'm passing the mic over in your direction, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree with my point system here? Do you think that Legends EA, for the most part, does so happen to be a little bit more superior to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in a lot of different ways, and it definitely improves, although it is a little bit of a problem because of the price point, and that's why it's more controversial than Scarlet and Violet? Or are you on the opposing side? Scarlet and Violet was miles better. It blows Legends EA out of the water. It doesn't matter what I say. That game is much more superior in every way, shape, and form, and I am wrong and need to be thrown in a ditch somewhere. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor, taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!